concepts of artificial servants date at least as far back as the ancient legends of Cadmus in 2000 BC and are related to Hellenistic concepts of automata peri. The root word thalma, meaning curiosity or a work of wonder for onlookers to marvel at. The hippoi kaburoki were four horse-shaped automatons crafted by the god Hephaestus out of bronze to draw the adamantine chariot of his two sons. Golems in the Talmud are the ancient equivalent for automaton or robot. In Ashkenazi Hasidic lore, a golem would serve by doing tasks assigned to him. These artificial people were ancient myths. The talking mechanical handmaidens built out of gold by the Greek god Hephaestus. Philon of Byzantium, creator of Compendium of Mechanics, invented various pneumatica, devices operated by air or water pressure, automata poica, diversions, and escapement mechanism, the earliest known. In pneumatica, a special schema of his as part of a washstand, a counterweighted spoon supplied by a water tank, when full, tips over in a basin, releasing a pumice. Once the spoon has emptied, it is pulled up again by the counterweight, closing the door on the pumice by the tightening string. Remarkably, its construction is similar to that of clocks. Such escapement mechanisms were already integrated in ancient water clocks and the repeating crossbow. Philon's works also contain known application of a chain drive. In a repeating crossbow, two flat-linked chains were connected to a windlass, which, by winding back and forth, would automatically fire the machine's arrows until its magazine was empty. The Hellenistic engineer and inventor Ctesibius fitted his clepsydras with dial and pointer for indicating the time, and added elaborate alarm systems which could be made to drop pebbles on a gong or blow trumpets by forcing bell jars down into water and taking the compressed air through a beating reed at preset times. Ctesibius invented a primitive form of the cannon, operated by compressed air. The Antikythera mechanism is an ancient analog computer designed to calculate astronomical positions. The construction has been dated to the early 1st century BC, known to simultaneously calculate both the Metonic and Saros cycles through accurate measurements of the sun and moon. Other planetary inclusions are suspected. The field of automata making was thought worthy of approval by previous authorities on account of the variety of craftsmanship which it entails, and because of the astonishing nature of the sight it provides. Hieron was a mathematician, physicist, geometer, and engineer who lived 10 through 70 AD and produced at least 3 texts: Pneumatica, Mechanica, and Automata, that account for hundreds of different kinds of machines capable of automated movement. His descriptions are a clear indication that ancient Greece was incorporating the idea of mechanical devices being integral to their lives, including in Pneumatica. Hero describes over 80 mechanical apparatuses working on air, steam, or water pressure, including the hydraulis, or water organ, a fire extinction apparatus, automata that provide water mechanically when a coin is inserted, coin action water dispenser, and the first steam engine, Aeolipile, in Peri Automata Poeticas, a description of machines which enable wonders in temples by mechanical or pneumatic means. Example: automatic opening or closing of temple doors, statues that pour wine, a moving altar of Dionysus, and a mechanical theater in which the actions of a Sophoclean tragedy play out in miniature form.
Not only the dead, but the living too. Then see to it that my orders are obeyed.
Balopiaca, a collection of war machines. The original manuscript, but medieval handwritten copies exist. And Mechanica, saved only in Arabic, written for architects, containing means to lift heavy objects. The Aeolipile, steam turbine, hero engine that was driven by steam. The name translates to the ball of Aeolus. Aeolus being the god of wind. Predating Huron's writings, a device called the Aeolipile was described in the 1st century BC, De Architectura, by Vitruvius. However, it is unclear whether it is the same device or a predecessor, as there is no mention of any rotating parts as Huron described the device. The water is heated in a simple boiler. The boiler is connected to the rotating chamber by a pair of pipes that also serve as the pivots for the chamber. After Ctesibius invented the water pump, Huron is said to have made an automata statue that poured wine, a model made that would fill a cup with a mixture of wine and water. The vessel was placed in her hand. You put an empty cup to the robot's left hand from the cup's weight towards the stable right hand, which was holding a goblet containing wine. Reaching at the goblet, the automatic machine was able to fill the cup with the desirable quantity. Greek wine was concentrated, thus very strong, needed dilution. So, the robot poured water in the cup, mixing it with the wine. The first automatic vending machine. When a coin was introduced through a slot on the top of the machine, a set amount of holy water was dispensed. When the coin was deposited, it fell upon a pan attached to a lever. The lever opened a valve, which let some water flow out. The pan continued to tilt with the weight of the coin until the coin fell off, at which point a counterweight would snap the lever back up and turn off the valve. The coin would slide off of the receiver, and the valve would close. Sources suggest that Huron created the first programmable robot as a device to entertain audiences at the theater. In about 60 AD, he constructed a cart with rope wrapped around two independent axles with a falling weight to provide power using pegs projecting from the axle Hereon could vary how the rope was wound around the axle, allowing the robot to change direction and move along a pre-programmed course. This primitive mechanism is indistinguishable to a modern binary computer language. Outmoded punch cards operated on the same principle. According to accounts, the device was controlled by a series of ropes with knots tied in them. As the rope was pulled through the device, the knots moved levers, which caused actions to happen on the miniature stage. Hereon used the same system of ropes, cylindrical axes, and knots to create a mechanical play of almost 10 minutes in length, including dropping metal balls onto a sheet of metal to resemble thunder. Hereon's Periautomatica Poeticus demonstrates that the theater was programmable. Hereon designed an automatic temple door opener, which used heat and pneumatics to open a set of temple doors. The priest lit a fire on the altar and causing it to expand. This expansion in volume forced water out of the sphere and into the bucket, which moved downwards under the extra weight. This bucket was connected to a rope coiled around a spindle. As the bucket moved downwards, this spindle revolved, making the doors open. Vitruvius around 27 and 23 BC describes a device used for indicating distance traveled by a vehicle. Archytas designed and built the first artificial self-propelled flying device, a bird-shaped model propelled by a steam jet engine that's said to have flown 200 meters in the 5th century BC. These writers are of no small authority, ancient authoritative figures. Each author was well known in antiquity for either ethnographic accounts of far places, travel narratives, or historical writing, which contain descriptions of natural and man-made wonders. One mythic writer, Aristeas of Proconnesus, was famous in antiquity both for his remote viewing ability, leave his body and travel to distant lands, and for the composition of an epic poem called the Arimispi. This poem told of Aristeas' journey to the land of the Scythians and Antecedents in the far north, and described the things which he learned on his travels about the one-eyed Aramispians and Hyperboreans, who inhabited the very furthest northern edges of the earth. The most detailed and famous account of Aristaeus' abilities and poetry is found in another later account of a distant land, the Scythian Logos, in Book 4 of Herodotus' Histories. It was not the content of Aramispia alone which was considered to be marvelous in later periods. Aristaeus himself appears as a marvel at the beginning of Apollonius' Paradoxographus Marvel collection. These works, classified by unexplainable phenomena of the natural or human worlds, are considered paradoxographical collections. Isagonius of Nicaea, a paradoxographer of the 1st century BC, wrote a work entitled Unbelievable Things, which had at least 2 books that contained marvels relating to the natural world, particularly wondrous bodies of water, Homeric scholia, contrasted by material about strange and wonderful distant peoples, such as the Scythian cannibals, called anthropophagoi, the Aramispians with one eye in the middle of their foreheads, and another unnamed far northern people whose feet are turned backwards. Men from Albania whose hair turns white in childhood and who can see better in night than day. And the Sauromatae, who are accustomed to eating once every 2 days. There are surviving eyewitness accounts of chirping mechanical birds in Middle Eastern palaces as early as the 9th and 10th centuries, with some reports of mechanical lions of Constantinople. Knowledge of how to make mechanical birds had spread to Western Europe a few centuries later, and realistic examples were found at Hesdin, alongside mechanical monkeys in the 14th century. Duke Philip III of Burgundy took this theme further in the following century, adding a mechanized fountain, a mechanical talking hermit, and more malign, playful contraptions, such as jets of soot and figures armed with sticks, programmed to attack visitors. Albertus Magnus, a 14th century Dominican friar, who was also an astrologer, created a talking metal statue that pronounced oracular responses to questions asked to it, before it was deliberately broken by Saint Thomas Aquinas, another friar from the same order, who had studied under Albertus but believed the automaton to be an evil idol. Richard II was ceremonially crowned the King of England by a mechanical angel built by the Goldsmiths Guild the day before his official coronation in 1377. Robotic monks got popular during the Renaissance. There was one commissioned by King Philip II of Spain that used a clockwork mechanism to pray, walk, move its lips, lift objects, and beat its chest. The Catholic Church widely commissioned clocks that featured advanced automata models of Jesus and depictions of Satan playing out biblical scenes. Robotic musicians able to play instruments were featured alongside robotic dancers. In 1738, a fully functional flute-playing robot had been created by Jacques de Vaucanson and put on a show in Paris. In the 1740s, de Vaucanson had also developed an automatic silk-weaving loom able to follow instructions programmed into it on cards, which caused riots by crochet workers and left the inventor in fear for his life, but was advanced with the first proven commercial application of digital programming by Joseph Jacquard in the form of cards punched with unique patterns. Then on from the 1770s, Belgian, Swiss, and Hungarian clockmakers and mechanics built only entertainment automata. In 1785, an integrated fully automatic water-powered industrial flour mill that operated continuously, using elevators and conveyor belts to transport material through the system, was introduced by Oliver Evans in Delaware. The Industrial Revolution, assisted by automatic machinery, was well underway. The development of the Watt steam engine between 1763 and 1775 is commonly regarded as the turning point in the Industrial Revolution. It vastly increased the efficiency of steam engines. By 1800, nearly 500 Watt engines were in industrial use, powering mill machinery, water pumps, and blast furnaces. People were in a state of wonder over mechanism. The first complex machines produced by man were called automata. The most remarkable mechanisms were those that could do things in imitation of living creatures. The Draughtsman Rider is one such machine, a boy in a tattered uniform that looked to be that of a French soldier, with either missing or irreparably damaged legs, but may have originally been in costume, bareheaded, with a wig in 1826. It was made to write from a memory contained in the cams or brass discs, using a motor to move the motors through a complex system of levers and rods that produce the markings on paper. In the 1820s, Charles Babbage developed the difference engine, an automatic mechanical calculator designed to tabulate polynomial functions. It had 25,000 paths. In 1833, Charles Babbage designed a blueprint for the first modern computer, involving separate software serving and hardware components, which he had called the analytical engine. It incorporated arithmetic logic, conditional branching and loops, and memory, and had several dedicated programs written for it in subsequent years. His analytical engine is a true computer, complete with the central processor, memory, punched cards, printer, a programming language with subroutines, and control transfer, an extremely powerful feature missing in many of the early computers of the 20th century, but only small parts of Babbage's massive design were constructed in his lifetime. He died in obscurity. The familiar term robot was originated by Czech writer Karel Čapek, who introduced it in his 1920 hit play Rossum's Universal Robots, from an Old Church Slavonic word, robota, which means servitude of forced labor. He first came up with a Latin word, labori, but the term was perceived to be too scholarly, and chose roboti, a product of the Central European system of serfdom, where a tenant's rent was paid for, enforced labor or service. Using biotechnology, they were mass-producing employees who lacked nothing but a soul. They could do all the works that humans preferred not to do, and the company was soon overcome with orders. Robots took over the workforce and military. Women no longer reproduce. Once they outnumbered humans, they revolted and took over the world, and eventually developed emotions and the ability to feel, replacing humans. Eric was the first British robot, built in 1928 by World War I veteran Captain William Richards and aircraft engineer Alan Reffel. It was operated by two people and transmitted voice live by a radio signal. His chest bore the letters RUR, a reference to the robot manufacturer in Karel Čapek's 1920 play of the same name. Although able to sit and stand, Eric could not move his legs to walk. Eric the robot introduced himself as the man without a soul while touring United States, where he went missing. In the 1930s, Captain Richards built a similar robot called George that toured across the world, mainly Germany and Australia. George could deliver speeches in French, German, Hindustani, Chinese, and Danish. He cost almost $2,000 compared to Eric's $140. The Age newspaper described him as the educated gentleman, alongside his rough-hewn, awkward brother. In 1936, Alan Turing developed his theoretical concept of a universal machine that became the model for every modern computer on planet Earth, the early blueprint on computable numbers, with applications to the Unscheidens problem, which led to the first digital electronic computer that could store both data and instructions in its memory. he developed the Secret Automatic Computing Engine, or ACE, under contract by the British government. But he more so wanted to understand the mathematical underpinnings of the human brain. As Turing wrote to a friend, "In working on the ACE, I am more interested in the possibility of producing models of the action of the brain than in the practical applications to computing." Soon after this, Turing published the paper Computing Machinery and Intelligence, which signals the founding of artificial intelligence as a scientific field, and where the now famous imitation game is used to test for computer intelligence. He was silenced and pushed out of the field once his private life was discovered, and was given estrogen, which lowered his mental acuity state, and eventually ended his life while still in obscurity. In 1941, a computer able to simultaneously solve 29 equations was constructed by J.V. Atanasoff and Clifford Berry of Iowa State University, while 1943 through 4, John Mauchly and J. Presper Eckert of the University of Pennsylvania built a huge digital computer called ENIAC, Electronic Numerical Integrator and Calculator, that deployed 18,000 vacuum tubes that filled a 20 by 40 foot room. The subsequent invention of the transistor in 1947 paved the way to space-saving tubeless solid-state electronics and to the integrated circuit in 1958. The first modern computer languages allowing programmers to convey simple-to-understand instructions instead of having to use assembly language were developed in the 1950s. The late Corrado Bohm of the University of Rome was an early pioneer. In 1952, in the UK, a language called autocode was developed. Subsequently, the better-known Fortran appeared in 1957, with Lisp following in 1958, COBOL in 1959, and the first incarnation of BASIC in 1964. C, a staple of late 20th century computing, was a relative latecomer to the scene, with development taking place from 1969 to 1973. The mixture of steel and plastics to create mechanical robots may seem rudimentary compared to the advancements made with alchemy, human creativity, knowledge, and metallurgy to create computing machinery. As sci-fi writer Arthur C. Clarke once noted, in a lot of ways, technology is indiscernible from magic. Since the Industrial Revolution, about 200 years ago, we've been getting better every year. It's been an exponentially accelerating trend. Autonomous weapon systems may have killed human beings the first time recently. The Libyan Civil War. There's been other reports of killer robots. The AI machine gun a self-driving Uber, a Dallas bomb robot, as GR-A1 sentries, robot suicides, Kawasaki robot arm, the Ventra Iona arm, and the Volkswagen Germany plant. The death robot has been in films such as Terminator. In 1818, in Frankenstein, the concept of golem and robot commonality was depicted, a foreshadowing of cyborg and killer automatons. Other early publications go back much further than one would suspect. Paradise Lost is cited as a source for Mary Shelley, where John Milton wrote about Satan, offers to corrupt God's new and beloved human beings, and a bridge is built between hell and earth. Milton writes the Son is the instrument through which God acts, and Milton shows how God and Son work separately yet are manifestations of the same entity, working as one. In the end, Adam and Eve have been led to understand that obedience to God and His love for His creation will lead humanity toward salvation, toward regaining a paradise that has been lost. A cyborg is an organism, often a human, that has biological and technological components, especially when they are integrated with the nervous system. The motive was to have complete power over someone, and it was brought up by his college professor, M. Waldman, that the occult works he studied set the foundations for modern sciences. But he has to study modern sciences now in order to have the ability to give someone almost unlimited power, seeking godlike gifts. Ceremonial magic is principally concerned with arguing that magic is intimately connected with religion, and that through a profound knowledge and pure use of the celestial hierarchy and the names and sigils borne by the angels, demons, and spirits, the magus may be elevated to the divine, achieve union with God. Essentially, the goal of ceremonial magic is for the magician to gain godlike power over demons or creatures. Neuralink is being heavily funded, which intends to use brain augments to edit and modify the subject's genetics, enhance cognitive and somatic abilities, tipping the scale of natural selection through cybernetic modification. The implant would turn humans into mechanically augmented cyborgs. For promise of material reasons, it could change the biochemistry for the worst and alter them into a lower form, with fabricated evidence from quasi-experiments, muddled with jargon overload to tantalize unwitting pawns, like a human proxy. Talk of clones have become more and more frequently appearing in publications. Either by deepfake technology or by hired look-alike body doubles. But some theorize there are already cyborgs among them. CRISPR, which allows for the editing of genes, among other augments, already give the opportunity to become like a cyborg. which would have already been the case had your mobile devices been connected to your body. Rich people will be the first to be able to acquire these augments, and those who believe the risks aren't significant in advancements in genetic engineering or playing with genes and researching life extension will be the ones furthering the science, disregarding any ethical considerations with editing genes and creating artificial life. Anyone in disagreement with the scientists are improperly seen as busybodies and worrywarts, the science community call it. For a better term, bioethicists. These bioethicists are viewed by cybernetic engineers and designers as just a barrier, preventing them from creating innovations to make life simpler and longer for those who can afford it, such as advanced technology, electronic neuromuscular stimulation given to athletes. The first living xenobots formed from the stem cells of the African clawed frog, Xenopus laevis, from which it takes its name. Xenobots are less than 0.04 inches wide, first unveiled in 2020, after experiments showed that they could move, work together in groups, and self-heal. They have discovered an entirely new form of biological reproduction, different from any animal or plant known to science. Frogs have a way of reproducing that they normally use, but when you liberate the cells from the rest of the embryo, and you give them a chance to figure out how to be in a new environment, not only do they figure out a new way to move, they also figure out a new way to reproduce. Stem cells are unspecialized cells that can develop into different cell types. To make the xenobots, the researchers scraped living stem cells from frog embryos and left them to incubate. There's no manipulation of genes involved. Most people think of robots as made of metals and ceramics. It's not so much what a robot is made from, but what it does, which is to act on its own on behalf of its creator. In that way, it's a robot, but it's also clearly made from genetically unmodified frog cell, initially sphere-shaped and made from 3,000 cells. Xenobots could replicate using kinetic replication, a process that occurs at the molecular level, which has never been done at the scale of whole cells or organisms. With artificial intelligence, the researchers then tested billions of body shapes to make the xenobots more effective. At this type of replication, the supercomputer came up with a C shape that resembled Pac-Man, able to find tiny stem cells in a petri dish, gather hundreds of them inside its mouth, and a few days later, the bundle of cells became new xenobots. Xenobots are a rudimentary technology Think of a 1940s computer, not yet employing any practical applications. This combination of molecular biology and artificial intelligence could potentially be used in a host of tasks in the body and the environment because of its plasticity and the cell's ability to solve problems. This may include things like collecting microplastics in the oceans, inspecting root systems, and regenerative medicines. The research was partially funded by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, a federal agency that oversees the development of technology for military use. Drones are becoming commonplace on the battlefield, where before were typically considered mere aerial surveillance. They've always had uses for military operations. Some are aquatic or land-based, and there have been drones since World War I, World War II, and Cold War era, but they were mechanical and operated by an individual with remote control. The need for unmanned air vehicles goes back to World War I. Elmer Sperry made a leveling device known as the gyro stabilizer, which is at the heart of most modern autopilots and many modern robots. Later, in 1917, the U.S. Navy gave Sperry's son a grant to build an aerial torpedo, the name again indicating the fact that they were designed to deliver weapons which would detonate upon impact, destroying the delivery vehicle. This led to the development of Curtiss N9, catapult-launched seaplane, which was capable of basic self-guided flight, but had a pilot to carry out the more complex takeoff. It was a flight of this kind that claimed the life of Joseph Kennedy. A radio-controlled version was later made, but it was just as crude, with its analog instruments not allowing precision flight or weapons delivery. In 1939, the Borgward Company of Germany, drawing on a French prototype, created a small electric tracked demolition vehicle with a container for explosives. The teleoperated machine would be directed to its position by radio control, coupled with a timing device. The explosives would then be dropped, and the machine would retreat, making for one of the first recoverable robots of its sort. Although, in practice, many failed to retreat in time. Toward the end of World War II, the Germans introduced the Feisler 103, known colloquially as the V1 buzz bomb, because of the buzzing sound it made when descending to its target. The V1, a precursor to later missiles, was cheap and simple, and with the aid of a reliable pulse jet engine, could carry a large payload over a range of a few hundred kilometers. Thousands of V1s were used to great effect in the bombings of southeast England, instilling fear in the population and establishing the infamous reputation of this weapon. In the 1950s and 60s, both General Electric and Ohio State University had interest in legged robots, developing manned prototypes that would be able to cross the most difficult terrain while carrying loads of equipment. General Electric's cybernetic walking machine was a quadruped, while OSU's adaptive vehicle was a more complex hexapod, which mimicked the tripedal gait of six-legged insects, with robotic legs touching the ground and alternating triangles, much like a cockroach. In 1953, the U.S. built the Cable-Controlled Underwater Recovery Vehicle, or CURV, a teleoperated unmanned submarine capable of performing inspection, survey, disposal, and retrieval tasks, all through a display screen, removing humans from the hazardous environment.
Both the French and Russians later designed similar systems with improved operator interaction systems, sensors, and robotic arms for the improved manipulation of objects.
Be or not to be? That is the question. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer too. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It would be a stylish marriage. I can't afford a carriage, but you look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle built for two. Thanks for listening.
The latter half of the Cold War period saw the continued drive for greater technologies, owing to concern about the threat posed by ballistic missiles to explore outer space. Nations around the globe continued to purchase unmanned systems. The British bought the Phoenix reconnaissance system, which could relay reliable near real-time images and data.
The U.S. Navy and the Marine Corps took delivery of the Pioneer, which could be teleoperated from a system small enough to be placed in a soldier's backpack. With the loss of manned U-2 reconnaissance aircraft over Soviet Russia and Cuba in the 1960s, some variants were later fitted with high-quality cameras and electronic sensors to perform politically sensitive reconnaissance missions. Various vertical takeoff and landing systems, rotorcraft, and aerostats were also developed. Unmanned submarines were pushed to new limits, with those like the American Deep Drone being used for a variety of tasks at depths well in excess of 3,000 feet below sea level for a variety of tasks. It was also around this time that unmanned vessels began successful untethered operation with improved acoustic, radio, and laser communications. This was alongside supervised autonomous operation. Unmanned fast boats were put to effective use as well, with those like the Sea Flash 300, a teleoperated jet ski-like vessel controlled by long-range radio and capable of reaching speeds of over 25 knots, used by the Royal Navy and other European naval forces. Furthermore, the then young U.S. Advanced Research Projects Agency, later renamed the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, advocated the development of unmanned frigates and destroyers with high-level autonomy. Unmanned ground vehicles also became much more sophisticated, with the creation of more refined communication links, displays, controls, and actuators. Many small teleoperated robots were built, some with rotating robotic arms, microphones, cameras, shotguns, and grenade launchers. Larger systems remained important, though they were not widely deployed. Robot defense systems engineered the Prowler, an armed terrestrial vehicle the size of a small truck. Performing well when teleoperated, it proved less robust when under supervised autonomous operation, limited by early microprocessors, rangefinders, and radar. It was also in this period that DARPA began to design more advanced ground vehicles with task-level autonomy. To achieve this, DARPA partnered with academic institutions, and this saw the creation of robotics labs at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Stanford University, together cultivating the development. The lead manufacturing countries in combat robotics are United States, Israel, Great Britain, Estonia, Iran, China, India, and Russia. One technological reason behind the early drive for autonomy had to do with communications. It was often difficult to send signals to systems at great depths, heights, or over rugged terrain, and those that were sent were vulnerable to interception and attack. The more autonomous the system, the fewer the control signals needed. Today, many military robot systems are capable of advanced task-level autonomy, even though bandwidth and interception are persistent problems. But the decision to use lethal force generally rests with the human operator. Although some systems are capable of firing their weapons at predesignated targets. However, in the future, we may well see the removal of human beings from the decision-making loop. That is, with software and computer processors becoming ever more advanced, it might be possible to create fully autonomous robots capable of learning and determining under which circumstances it should use lethal force. FPV radio control drones have grown in popularity and have been seen exploding wounded soldiers to finish them off during the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. These are not technically considered robotic, but unmanned combat aerial vehicles, or UCAVs. Drone assassinations are rising. In one account, 2 Israeli operatives reportedly used a remote-controlled gun to assassinate an Iranian scientist. They made the device, gradually smuggling parts in to not arouse suspicion, and upon terminating the target, the 2 operatives exploded the truck in an attempt to destroy the evidence, but the equipment remained intact, but still inoperable. Iran probably would have never found out how Israel took out the scientist had the gun been destroyed as planned. Autonomous weapon systems are unmanned robots with lethal weapons that can operate independently, selecting and attacking targets without a human weighing in on those decisions. Militaries around the world are investing heavily in autonomous weapons research and development. The US alone budgeted $18 billion for autonomous weapons between 2016 and 2020 to counter China's rapid militarization. Information released by the Department of Defense call it the replicator program, with focus on churning out thousands of small, smart, cheap, and mini combat units, now undergoing development. As their aggressive 18 to 24 month roadmap started over a year ago already, the Department of Defense requested $1.8 billion for artificial intelligence for fiscal 2024 and was overseeing more than 685 related projects as of 2021. People's Liberation Army low-cost, high-endurance drone jet engine innovation gives China yet another cost-competitive edge over United States with superior performance at less than a fifth of international price. This is because it consumes nearly a third less fuel than the current 2-shaft engines that are in use, and because maintenance costs will be significantly cheaper due to having 70% fewer mechanical components. These field-attritable autonomous war robots can carry out complex missions without human intervention, on land, at sea, in the air, and in space, for all kinds of tasks. Attritable means the robot is cheap enough that it can be placed at risk and lost if the mission is of high priority. Such a robot is not quite designed to be disposable, but it would be reasonably affordable, so many can be bought and replaced. The reasons for high drone losses are technical, as drone data links are susceptible to jamming. The unmanned weapons fly at lower and medium altitudes, also making them vulnerable to short-range air defenses. United States is in a clandestine Cold War struggle with China and still competing with Russia. And the Taiwan War is around the corner, which makes vocations like programming and Internet of Things, important. The drones are not limited to military purposes, and systems can be fielded by minor powers, from cheap cardboard body drones, robot submarines, robot sailboats, and robot mechanized armored land vehicles. The Replicator project aims to develop the capability to launch and command thousands of autonomous drones, working together to destroy an enemy's defenses, including air defenses, artillery pieces, missile launchers, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance (ISR) platforms. Chinese Sunflower 200 loitering munition, which is purportedly modeled after the Iranian Shahed 136, the weapon Russia is using in the ongoing Ukraine conflict, that it has extensively modified to suit the specific battlefield conditions in the area. The drone was displayed during the Army 2023 Defense Exhibition in Moscow. Despite China having the capability to mass produce the Sunflower 200 and improved versions for Russia, it has taken a cautious approach to its support for Moscow's war effort, balancing its interests favorable to its benefit while avoiding Western sanctions. While it is unlikely that the Sunflower 200 will soon appear in Russia's arsenal, China has sent dual-use drones to Russia, cognizant that they will be put to use against Ukrainian targets. Drones can be a stubborn challenge to fight off. Even the best air defenses can become useless against such drones, as they usually fly too low to be detected. China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation's new anti-drone systems include an electro-optic radar and DK-1 low-altitude detecting radar, the ZK-K-20 ground missile anti-air control system, the HQ-17AE and QW-12 short-range missiles, and the ZR-1500 unmanned smart defense weapon system. The electro-optic radar and DK-1 low-altitude detecting radar work together to provide early warning and can detect multiple targets simultaneously. The drone field is rapidly evolving, as it's a primary focal point of all the main defense contractors and weapon manufacturers worldwide. One big problem is not that the machines will just miscalculate. It's that the difference between human error and algorithmic error is humans make small-scale errors. The scale, scope, and speed of killer robot systems with a single target algorithm deployed in a wide range, could make misidentifications by individual humans, whether the robot itself, the robot's operator, the operator's commanders, or the makers of the robot are the ones to go to trial, make accountability gap. Another issue is nations could compete to develop increasingly devastating versions of autonomous weapons, including ones capable of mounting chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear arms. There are suspicions that sublunary devices made to cause permanent brain damage via some microwave radiation device, particularly aimed at diplomatic personnel all over the world, also collect intelligence from their computers and cell phones, as well as causing serious harm to the people they target, including major psychological and irreparable hearing damage. This hypothesis was fashioned by federal American agencies to explain the recurring Havana syndrome contractions among government staff internationally. What could be psychotronic weaponry targeted individuals are described to exhibit psychological disorders upon reporting electronic harassment, including electromagnetic torture and EMF radiation. Although Jason has already declassified a report to the State Department, dismissing sounds associated with the Havana syndrome cases as caused by crickets, as opposed to microwave weapons. Havana syndrome is caused by unknown origin. The symptoms range in severity from pain and ringing in the ears to cognitive dysfunction, and were first reported in 2016 by U.S. and Canadian embassy staff in Havana, Cuba. Beginning in 2017, more people, including U.S. intelligence and military personnel and their families, reported having these symptoms in other places, such as embassies in China, India, Europe, and Washington, D.C. The U.S. Department of State, Department of Defense, and other federal entities have called the events anomalous health incidents. As of June 2018, the number of American citizens experiencing symptoms was 26. The original 21 events in Cuba were characterized as starting with strange grating noises coming from a specific direction. Some people experienced pressure, vibration, or a sensation comparable to driving a car with the window partly rolled down, and happened while the diplomats were either at home or in hotel rooms. Other people nearby, including family members and guests in neighboring rooms, did not experience the same symptoms. In 2021, a panel of 16 scientists affiliated with the Cuban Academy of Sciences and convened by the Cuban government reported that the narrative of the mysterious syndrome is not scientifically acceptable in any of its components. The panel addressed the microwave hypothesis directly, writing, "No known form of energy can selectively cause brain damage with laser-like spatial accuracy under the conditions described for the alleged incidents in Havana. Some U.S. embassy workers have experienced lasting health problems, including an unidentified diplomat who now needs a hearing aid. The U.S. State Department declared that the health problems were either the result of an attack or due to exposure to an unknown device, but that it was not blaming the Cuban government and would not say who was to blame. Affected people described symptoms such as hearing loss, memory loss, and nausea. Speculation centered around a sonic weapon, with some researchers pointing to infrasound as a possible cause. In March 2018, MRI scans and other tests taken by a chief neurologist in Pittsburgh on an unspecified number of Canadian diplomats showed evidence of brain damage that mirrored the injuries some of their American counterparts had faced. In early 2018, Global Affairs Canada ended family postings to Cuba and withdrew all staff with families. Several of the Canadians who were affected in 2017 were reported to still be unable to resume their work due to the severity of their ailments. The lack of knowledge of the cause of Havana syndrome as of February 2019 had made it challenging for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to investigate. The Canadian government announced that it was reducing its embassy staff in Havana after a 14th Canadian diplomat reported symptoms of Havana syndrome. In February 2019, several Canadian diplomats sued the Canadian government, arguing that it had failed to protect them or promptly address serious health concerns. The government has sought to dismiss the suit, arguing in November 2019 that it was not negligent and did not breach its duties to its employers. In September 21, aide-de-camp of Chief William J. Burns reported symptoms accordant with those of Havana syndrome on a diplomatic visit to India. In 2021, dozens of U.S. personnel stationed in Vienna, including diplomats, intelligence officials, and some children of U.S. employees, had Havana syndrome-like symptoms. It's noted that Vienna was hosting indirect talks between the United States and Iran on reviving the 2015 Iran deal. In September 2021, the CIA station chief in Vienna was recalled over concerns over his management. He had been criticized for not taking quicker action in response to the Havana syndrome cases at his post. In the months preceding August 2021, cases of Havana syndrome were reported at the U.S. Embassy in Berlin, Germany, including from 2 U.S. officials who sought medical treatment. Several new cases were reported at the embassy in October 2021. In that same year, the CIA evacuated an intelligence officer serving in Serbia, suspected of being a victim of the neurological attack. 3 White House staffers reported symptoms at the Intercontinental London Park Lane. One of the CIA officials with symptoms in Australia and Taiwan was one of the agency's top 5 officials. The Russian embassy in Australia dismissed reports of Russian operatives targeting CIA personnel in Australia. In October 2021, it was reported that U.S. Embassy personnel and their families in Bogota, Colombia, had developed symptoms corresponding with Havana syndrome. Initial investigation assessment was soiled by confusion, disorganization, and excessive secrecy. FBI's investigation into the incidents was hindered by conflict with the CIA and the State Department. The CIA was reluctant to reveal, even to other U.S. government agencies, the identities of affected officers because of concern about possible leaks. A new syndrome in the diplomats that resembles persistent concussion. While some of these affected recovered swiftly, others had symptoms for months. The study concluded that the diplomats appeared to have sustained injury to widespread brain networks. Microwaves were considered a main suspect underlying the phenomenon. The nature of the noises the diplomats report they heard matches sounds caused by pulsed RFMW via the Frey effect, and the signs and symptoms the diplomats reported matched symptoms from RFMW exposure. Problems with sleep, cognition, vision, balance, equilibrium, speech, headaches, sensation of pressure or vibration, nosebleeds, brain injury, and brain swelling, plus oxidative stress. A mechanism of RFMW injury resembles reported signs and symptoms.
We're off to bombing next
And
week.
in the past, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow was subject to a microwave beam called the Moscow signal, was inferred to be a Soviet espionage technique that might have also had health effects. Neuroscientist Alan H. Frey, for whom the Frey effect is named, considers the microwave theory viable. Many current and former U.S. officials stated that Russia was likely responsible for the alleged attacks, a suspicion shared both by Trump and Biden administration officials. This view was shared by CIA on Russia, State Department officials, outside science experts, and several of the alleged victims. Russia has a history of researching, developing, and using weapons that cause brain injuries, such as the Cold War era Moscow signal targeting the American embassy in Moscow. 2020 NSA report raised suspicions that Russia used a microwave weapon to target a person's living quarters, causing nervous system damage. It's established that Russia has an interest in disrupting cooperation among the U.S., China, and Cuba. The U.S. diplomats stationed in China and Cuba, who reported elements were working to increase cooperation with those countries, and some analysts voiced suspicion Russia thus sought to derail their work. A U.S. Office of Special Counsel investigation resulted in an April 2020 determination that there was a substantial likelihood of wrongdoing by State Department leadership. Mark Lindsay, who was a State Department diplomatic security officer stationed in Guangzhou, accused the department of a deliberate high-level cover-up and of failing to protect their employees. Mark Polymeropoulos, a 26-year CIA veteran who retired in 2019, similarly felt betrayed by CIA leadership, accusing the agency of failing to respond appropriately to a vertigo-inducing incident in Moscow in December 2017. Polymeropoulos said the event was the most terrifying experience of his life, worse than experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. Polymeropoulos fought with the CIA for years to obtain specialized medical treatment after the agency cast doubt on the similarities between the symptoms he experienced and those experienced by the diplomats in Havana. Polymeropoulos was ultimately diagnosed with traumatic brain injury near the end of the Trump administration. The Department of Defense established a task force to investigate reports of attacks on DoD personnel abroad. The DoD established the task force due to frustration over what DoD officials considered to be a sluggish and lackluster response by the CIA and Department of State. Christopher Miller, who was acting Defense Secretary at the time, said in 2021 that he began to consider the reports of mysterious symptoms to be a high priority in December 2020, after he conducted an interview with a person with major combat experience who detailed symptoms. In December 2020, after continued reports of debilitating attacks against CIA officers in various places around the world. The CIA established a task force to investigate. The Central Intelligence Agency expanded its investigation under Director William J. Burns, who took office in 2021. Burns appointed a senior CIA officer who had previously led the manhunt for Osama bin Laden to lead the agency's investigation. The finding undercuts a year-long narrative, propped up by more than 1,000 reports from government employees, that a foreign adversary used pulsed electromagnetic energy waves to sicken Americans. It's alarming, the amount of radioactivity emitting from radar beams side lobe. For instance, serious concerns were raised about radiation leaking out of the solid-state phased array radars at Royal Air Force filing dells, which track and silently observes unsaid objects out of North York Moors in England, with the motto Vigilamus, which translates to "We are watching." Magnetron, an early radar device, could also be used as an RF weapon. Sidekicks have been used by the government agencies since the late 70s. Popularized by men who stare at goats. But a CIA and DIA program researched a phenomenon called remote viewing to find and evaluate information, events, potential adversaries by means beyond known sensory or perceptual faculties to the human mind. Out-of-body experiences, seeing locations, objects or events shielded from ordinary perceptions in a spatial location, separate from one's physical body. The Stargate program, so it's called once it was declassified, was rechristened with a few different code names, and originally started as a secret U.S. Army unit overseen by psychic headhunter Lieutenant Frederick Holmes Skip Atwater, who worked as aide to Major General Albert Stubblebine, an intelligence officer seeking to develop an army of soldiers with psychic powers that also attempted to walk through walls and wanted to make super soldiers who could become invisible. It was at their intel base, Fort Meade, Maryland. They found that they could alter brainwaves using sound and vibrations as a form of mind reading to enhance remote viewing. They also investigated what they could gather about the afterlife, and three-letter agencies today still don't rule out the spirit world for their experiments in psychic intelligence. But this was achieved only after the Germans explored magic for remote influence, which indeed helped enhance remote influence during World War II. NS occultists pushed human physiology to extremes, and the Soviet Union's use of electromagnets to experiment with parapsychology called psychotronics, conducted covert operations with extrasensory perception. One of these individuals studied with ESP traits, Nina Kolgina. A case of telekinesis was found in the experiments, filmed during the Cold War in black and white archival footage, where she would separate broken eggs in water, separating the egg yolk and the white of the egg, all while changes in her brain activity, heartbeat, and the electromagnetic field occurred. She also was recorded to have removed a specifically marked matchstick from a pile of matchsticks under a glass dome on a table outside of the metal cage she was placed in. When Nina was 14, she fought in World War II with a Soviet tank regiment, and the psychic abilities started out not yet honed, and objects would move around her when she was angry. Over time, she improved her ESP, and in the 1960s, she was being studied up until the 1980s. In another experiment, the Leningrad scientists attempted to use Nina to remotely kill a frog. It said she made the frog's heart beat faster, then slower, and then, after intense mental focus, stopped its heart telekinetically. With these declassified experiments on crystal gazers and mediums, there are some documents that belong in keeping with them but are still classified. Much of the high-level sorcery that occurs today is for military intelligence gathering, which was sharpened in the Stargate project from 1978 to 1995. One famous remote viewer, Joseph McMoneagle, said he has viewed present visions as well as past and future events, such as Iranian hostages, Chinese nuclear facilities, where he remotely viewed a trigger mechanism inside a military nuclear weapons laboratory, and even viewed Gaddafi. McMoneagle wrote that he had precognitions of the 1979 Typhoon submarine the Soviet Union made, and also that the armed forces used remote viewing in detailed examination of a Soviet R&D facility, and in trying to locate Osama bin Laden. Other parapsychological skills included dowsing, the clairvoyant ability to find water, the psychic division dissolved from the public eye, according to McMoneagle, because of stigmas, saying you can kiss your career goodbye if you're involved in remote viewing. Understandably so, as it would effectively be like a personal time machine. It was later, when the program transferred over to the DIA, where it was realized The advantages over the risk of harming the subjects was documented in a memo. Remote viewing is inexpensive. The principal cost of remote viewing collection is the people involved. There is little expensive hardware, since for the most part, the people themselves are the equipment. The esoteric symbolism in the military is right in front of our nose, with 5 pointed stars and the lightning bolts on civil affairs and psychological operations patches, menacing National Reconnaissance Office spy mission patches depicting reptilian humanoids and occult archetypes having domain over the earth, and the ghastly psyops patches containing imagery that evokes a cold kind of emptiness and the voidness of a soul. Mind forfeited by these thought experiments could be compared to the robot. Acts on behalf of its creator, no regard for their own self, as mind control does to a human. The early high-level human experiments in the United States were poised by some of the most brilliant experts during the Third Reich, who were advisors on the leading edge, brought over during Operation Paperclip. Then the martial psychic studies were further conditioned during the Vietnam conflict, and perhaps well grasped by the end of the 1980s. The term extrasensory perception refers to telepathy, dowsing, precognition, and remote viewing, while the term PK refers to psychokinesis. Psychotronics describe the amplification of psychic energies by electronic devices. The Cold War saw more militarization of psychic abilities, complementing conventional spying, using coordinate scanning for the purpose of surveillance and mapping. Psychics extended the functionality of satellites through increased mobility, improved resolution, and accelerated transmission rates, which explains why they were often understood as automata. The CIA studies the superficial world for supernatural lessons. Practitioners of holistic medicine, diviners, animals, and more are researched for paraphysical abilities. For instance, an old dowser used a tree branch to help some friends determine where to drill for water on their mountain property. Contrary to geologists' recommendations, he chose the perfect spot and preconceived how much water it would yield and how far down to drill. Dowsing oil or other minerals is an established practice everywhere. During the Vietnam conflict, the United States Marine Corps trained a platoon of dowsers to locate hidden tunnels and weapons cache in Hue. They were withdrawn after 5 months because the successful use of dowsing appeared to require special skills that cannot be taught to the average Marine. The commander of the Training and Development Command did not discredit dowsing, but merely pointed out It is a special skill his Marines hadn't mastered. In time, research shows the capacity for developing genuine psychic abilities lies latent in many humans. Distinguished scientists from diverse fields who were defamed and professionally mocked for their psychic research, which ultimately hindered the U.S. advances in remote viewing. Synthetic hybridization, like the changeling in Irish folklore, resembles the rite of the golem, or homunculus, recounting shaping miniature full-form human figures. The homunculus was believed to inhabit a germ cell and to have the capacity to increase in size, giving rise to an adult human. Homunculi are not individuals and are mundanely expected to do their creator's bidding. The premise is that their emptiness or lack of ego prevents spirituality, internally detached from God. It's disputed whether they would have no soul or instead be inhabited by sunken spirits. Human embryonic stem cells are supposedly immortal, which would be beneficial to a spirit, for instance. Now return to the image of automata, who populate Plato's famous image of the cave to describe the workings of human psychology. Suppose that each living creature is a thama belonging to the gods, put together to be either a toy of theirs, or for some serious reason. They don't know why they're made, but they do know that feelings, like chords or strings inside them, both pull them along, and being opposed to one another, in mutual opposition, pull them towards opposite actions, where the dividing line between goodness and badness lies. The most common interpretation of this phrase is something like puppet of the gods, or divine puppet, with the chords or strings inside humans corresponding to the chords which control a marionette type object. The thalma works according to the chords and strings on human psychology is supposed to function. The fact that chords and strings are involved is perfectly congruous with this interpretation of the Athenian stranger's biological automata as automata. Since we know that ancient automata and self-moving mechanisms were made to move through the use of a system of internal cords, which were wound up and operated with the actions of weights, counterweights, and pulleys. In fact, it was the automaton's apparent ability to move itself and become animate without continued input from elsewhere, which appear to be so lifelike, often said to be a leading cause of wonder. The automata, identified as puppets or marionettes, are a result of influence from Republic's cave allegory. Men compared to marvel makers, thaumatopoi, in charge of the objects described as thaumaata that are causing the shadows being cast upon the wall of the cave. These marvel makers therefore seem to be undertaking some form of shadow puppetry. But it is essential to note that although the shadows in this passage are made to appear through the external agency of the marvel makers, they are not seen as such by the people who are watching the performance in the cave, since the shadows they see displayed before them seem to move of their own accord. The effect is one of autonomous motion.
Why is it the more we become like men, the more some of them hate us for it?
Men hate what they fear. You have perfect memory, infallible logic. You never tire. You're circuited against anger and violence.
And in your world, that leaves us pretty helpless.
We have to study for years to learn what you pick up by plugging into a brain for 2 hours.
We don't refer to the father-mother as a brain.
Your father-mother's an electronic computer, just a machine.
Your parents were machines. It's just that they were engineered with flesh and bones. Neither are ideal components.
You came off a production line.
I know who created me. Hollister Evans in the Mark 47. You have to accept your creator on faith.
Who created your creator?
Yours. You see, we are brothers, aren't we?
I ought to know better than to argue with you clickers. Can't beat your logic.
You see, we are brothers, aren't we?
Frank, this is Medevac, over. Frank, Mike, is contact Medevac, over.
PsyOps officer Michael A. Aquino, author of Mind War, proposed that one day the military will focus on bypassing armies in order to attack population, culture, and institutions through mass media to reach all people on the face of the earth, referring to television and radio. He says state-of-the-art developments and satellite communication, video recording techniques, and laser and optical transmission of broadcasts make possible a penetration of the minds that would have been inconceivable before, insinuating the entertainment and music industry is involved in psychological warfare to attack population, culture, and institutions, and extending the idea to today. Social media platforms would be a psychological theater of mind war. The CIA has some of the world's greatest psychic warriors. Some could even be called sorcerers. In ancient texts, such as the Old Testament, war upon war is depicted, and God was high general, and still today, the Muslim and the Jew are at each other's throats. When the Vatican speak, keeping lots of secrets, they have the whole world's attention. Divinity breaches reason, and whether it's a jihad or a holy war, mysticism proliferates death. Human embryonic stem cells are supposedly immortal, which would be beneficial to a spirit, for instance, so they don't have to go through the inconvenience of having to find a new body to possess. The traditional Talmudic cosmological hierarchy of angels often gets overlooked and questioned, while the lower entities, fallen angels or demons, could well be accepted in New Age mysticism as idols. Much of the mythology, back to the Babylonian age, is interpreted literally from a superficial perspective. Up to the Greco-Roman era, humans may have operated in a more naturally clairvoyant state, more readily open to spiritual thinking.